with students, whether they're in kindergarten or they're college students. So we want to try to inspire those people to take on these roles after we are no longer around. So a little bit more about Lubee. We house the largest and most diverse collection of bats. We have about 170 animals here. Bat species, we have about 13. We are, as I mentioned, an association of zoos and aquariums certified related facility. So facilities that are certified or accredited by the AZA include Disney's Animal Kingdom, Columbus Zoo, San Diego. So a lot of the bigger ones are what AZA or AZA certified and accredited. So basically every 5 years you go through this accreditation process, and it's everything from safety and security to finances to animal welfare, conservation, governance, you name it, they go through it. It's a big inspection. You can be and we just got our latest certification back in March 2020, so we're very proud of that. Lubee is the only organization in the world that houses endangered bat species while maintaining active conservation education programs. And we were founded in 1989. So we've been around for quite a while, going to be getting ready to celebrate our 32 years here in a few months. We had this made a couple years ago whenever we had celebrated our 30 years. And these are just some of our accomplishments. 170,000 people reach. We're probably approaching 200,000. We've had about 160 articles come out of Lubee. We've installed, well, we're actually up to 86 bat houses throughout the Southeast. Most of them are in Florida. We have worked and helped to save 15 endangered species, working in 19 countries. We actually just got some recent grants, and that is up to about 21 countries right now. 180 projects have been funded, and some of the other things that we've been involved with, we've built schools, created jobs, helped to work with governments to protect forests, empowered women's groups, and we work with all sorts of folks here, including Wounded Warriors, Boys and Girls Club, and Big Brothers Big Sisters. So in a little over 30 years, Lubee has done a lot. So why bats? Well, whenever we were founded, there really wasn't a lot of research knowledge known on them, especially these big bats, the large flying foxes. So really, we wanted to learn more about them. They're very unique. I mean, they're the only mammals that can fly. They're very essential to our economy, to ecosystem health. What we like to say is that bats are some of the most important animals to humans because of the ecosystem services that they do on a daily basis. So what are bats? Well, they are mammals. They are in their own order, Chiroptera, which is Latin for hand wing. And this is a pretty cool slide that we took of one of our bats years ago to give you a pretty good example of what we're actually looking at here. What is a bat? So this is a picture from the back side as this bat was flying. And you can see that its upper arm, so here's its shoulder down to its elbows, in pretty much relative comparison to ours. But what really makes them unique and enables them to fly is this huge forearm and huge fingers. So this is the bat's elbow here, and this you can see how large the forearm is. And then these are all the fingers, so thumb is digit 1, then 2, 3, 4, 5. And you have this skin in between the fingers, and then in between the area between the pinky, digit 5 here, and then the ankle. We also, there's also a sheet of skin from the shoulder to the base of the thumb, and then a little one right here. And that skin is called the patagium. Now, if you look at this area, they don't really have much in the way of a backside. So bats are mammals just like us. They do not have hollow bones like a bird. So they've lost a lot of that musculature and a lot of the bones here in their back sides. But what enables them to hang on and hang upside down is they have these locking tendons in their toes. So just like it takes effort for us to curl our toes, it takes effort for a bat to release them and to let go. And that's one of the reasons that bats hang upside down, is so they can take flight. All they need to do is look around, which is a myth that they're blind, look around and see where they want to go. They drop with their feet and take off. But again, you can see in this shot here that pretty much this area from their elbows in kind of looks similar to a primate, but it's these forearms and these fingers which really enables them to fly. So what are bats related to? Now, I said that this is going to be interactive, so if anybody'd like to chime in with an answer, please do so. So are bats more closely related to primates or rodents, mice, or tigers and carnivores? Does anybody want to take a guess? One person's going to chime in, or this is going to be a long presentation. Anybody? Okay.
I'll go first, and I'd say, oh, I was going to say monkey.
It's actually tigers and carnivores. So This is a pretty good shot of the tree of mammals. So we can find bats right over here. And they are, so if you look at kind of where they branch off, in actuality, they're more closely related to these guys, Paraceodactyls, which stands for odd-toed, which includes the rhinos, tapirs, and equidae, which are horses. But if you look where they branch off, you can see the carnivores up here, so felids and canids. So if we look at where humans are in the grand scheme of things, and then look at rodents, humans and rodents are actually more closely related to each other than they are to bats. Bats are kind of over here with the carnivores and also with the odd-toed. Then you have this little guy right here that bats are closely related to, the Pholidata. Does anybody know what that animal is based on its shape? They are the most trafficked mammal in the world right now. There are 8 species, and bats and these animals are blamed for maybe being the ancestral host from the SARS-CoV-2 virus. Does anybody know what they are? Pangolins. Pangolins are in the news very much right now because they think that they may have jumped from pangolins to humans. And we're going to talk a little bit about of a SARS here going on, but you can see that they're actually really kind of closely related. That a lot of people think of bats as flying rodents, flying mice. Rodents are all the way over here. Here's humans and primates. Bats are way, way over here. They're in their own order, second most numerous order, by the way, right after rodents. So let's talk about some myths. Are bats blind? They are not. All bats can see well. Whether they echolocate or not doesn't really matter because bats can all see. So there are about 1,400 species of bats, and about 200 of those are the kind that we have here at Lubee, the big old world fruit bats, flying foxes. Those kind of bats do not echolocate. Whereas the ones that we have around here in Florida and found globally, microbats do. But whether they echolocate or not, it doesn't matter. No bats are blind. They can all see very, very well. So are bats blind? They are not. They can actually, or just, you know what? I kind of screwed this up. Oh, sorry. Are bats blind? No, we just went over that. Do bats have rabies? No, they do not. Bats can get rabies just like any other mammal out there, but they don't just have it. In actuality, less than 1/10 of 1% have rabies. So no, they do not just have rabies. They're not blind. And then do they get caught in your hair? No, they do not. If you're walking around, especially in the warmer months, you may have some insects around you. Humans have a tendency to have a lot of insects living around us. That bat may swoop down to get those insects, but they do not get caught in your hair. So I mentioned before about how many species. As of right now, there are about 1,421 species and counting. When I first started working with bats about 25 years ago, there were only about 900 species of bats out there. So here in about 2.5 decades, they found close to 500 bat species, which are actually absolutely incredible. So this picture taken in the middle here is a Millennium Flying Fox. This is the largest species in the world. We have about 60 of them here at Lubee. This guy here is called an African straw-colored fruit bat. What's pretty cool about this species is they form the largest mammal migration in the world. We might think of wildebeests or caribou. Actually, the largest mammal migration are these guys. And in Africa, every late October and early November, between 10 and 12 million of them migrate to this called Kasenga National Park in Zambia, Africa. And that's whenever a lot of the trees there are fruiting, they're blossoming, and a lot of the bats come into this area, which is pretty wild. This is called a wrinkle-faced bat, kind of an odd-looking animal. Its face is shaped like that because it echolocates. Whenever bats echolocate, it usually comes out of their mouth. These guys echolocate through their nose. This is called a horseshoe bat. Same thing, they echolocate out of their nose. This is where the echolocations come from. This is called a headed bat out of Africa. It's a fruit eater. These two are insect. This is a fruit eater. And the reason it has that odd shaped nose is because the males make these very unique vocalizations to sing and call to the females. And the male with the best voice is the one who gets the ladies. So they do this behavior called a lek behavior, where a bunch of males get together and strut their stuff and sing their calls and fan their wings and have these shoulder pads, these big shoulder tufts that come out. But they're pretty unique bat. This guy right here, you folks may see down in your clinic. This is a Mexican free-tailed bat or Brazilian free-tailed bat, and they are one of the most common bats in the Southeast. We do a lot with bat houses, and we usually find these guys in about 95% of our houses. So let's talk a little bit about what bats eat. So there are carnivorous bats. These are not the vampire bats. We'll talk about them in a bit. So some bats eat frogs, and they only eat the male frogs. Anyone want to guess why? Actually, I'm sorry, that's a bat. I keep getting confused. That's a fish. These guys only eat male frogs. Anybody want to take a guess why? Because the males are the only ones making noise. So that's why they're going after them. This is a bulldog bat from Central and South America. And then there are some bats that will eat birds. There are some species, carnivorous bats, that will eat other bats as well. And they're pretty big. This is called a false vampire bat out of South America, and their body can be about 1 foot long. They're huge. What's pretty unique about them, though, is they're monogamous. It's a male and a female who are raising the young together, and they usually have their young with them for a couple of years. So that's pretty unique among bat species, whenever usually it's just females. So there are vampire bats. They're very small. They live in Mexico, Central and South America. They kind of gave bats a bad rap. A lot of people think of bats as these, rabid, blood-sucking animals. Well, we just talked about how there are 1,400 species of bats. Only 3 of them are vampire bats. And the common vampire bat is very common because they keep cutting down the forests and putting in pasture land, and there's a lot of cattle there, so common vampire bats will go after them. It's easy. The latter 2 species, white-winged and hairy-legged, for the most part, they feed on birds, and they're considered threatened with extinction. So this is primarily what Lubee has, although we have a handful of native bats here as part of our collection. These are fruit bats. All these pictures were taken here at Lubee. So these are called little golden mantled flying foxes from the Philippines. This is another one of the Malaysians, the big guys, the giants of the bat world. And this one's a little bit smaller, called a variable flying fox. So about 20% of all the bat species are considered fruit bats, and then 70% are the insect bats, which all the bats here in Florida are insectivorous species. So let's talk about some of our Florida bats, and you guys may see some of this species I'm going to pull up. I believe Carrie just mentioned that you guys have a yellow bat, which are pretty common in Florida. So we have 13 species here in Florida. I'd mentioned all of them are insectivorous. You can pretty much split them up into cave and structure roosting bats, typically live in colonies, and then you have your tree bats, which are for the most part solitary, live by themselves. So these are your tree roosting solitary bats. They're very colorful, they're big, compared to some of the other species that we have here. So you guys had mentioned you have yellow bats. Hoary bats are here, although we don't see them very often. Seminole and red bats are pretty, their echolocation calls are similar. They look fairly similar, but these are some pretty cool bat species. Yellow bats usually hang in palm fronds. Your Seminole and red bats are usually kind of in oak trees, some of the other areas, and hoary bats like to be in pine trees. So these are really, really cool species, pretty big compared to these bats that we see here. So these are your cave structure roosting bats, and these are the ones that roost in fairly large colonies. So I mentioned the free-tailed bat, and then evening and southeastern bats, southeastern myotis are what we have. We have a couple of these guys here at Lubee. And these southeastern bats, Florida is one of the hot spots for maternity colonies. There's a lot of caves in Florida, especially in the north and central area, and some of the largest maternity colonies for this species here, some of the caves here around Gainesville, where Lubee's located. Has anybody been to the bat houses at our University of Florida campus? Ever heard of the Gainesville bat houses? It's pretty wild. There are, in the summertime, over 500,000 bats in the 3 houses that are there, which is pretty incredible. And it's mostly made up of the free-tailed bats, small numbers of the southeastern and the evening bats, like what I'd shown before. So yeah, there are 3 houses there. And what's pretty wild is that it's the largest inhabited bat houses in the world. 500,000 is a lot. And they're pretty much active year-round. Whenever the temperatures drop about 55 at sunset and keep getting lower, they really won't come out. But I mean, it's, here we're in Florida, as you guys are, so pretty warm a lot of the year. But what's neat is not only watching the bats as they're emerging, but it's the predators that are there, the birds of prey. It's just this aerial combat display. You have a lot of owls and hawks, and the bigger ones will come in and try to, they're not maneuverable enough to just pick these bats off on the wing. So they'll just kind of come down and hit them as they're in these big swarms. But it's these little bats. You guys may see or get in Mississippi kites. It's your facility there, and Mississippi kites are pretty small, and they can actually pick these guys off in midair. So it's pretty neat to kind of see that display. And then we have a couple of other species here. We have the gray bat and the Florida bonneted bat. Do you guys ever get in Florida bonneted bats where you're at?
Very rare, and we transfer them to the zoo. They do a lot of work. Yeah, they do a lot of work with them.
Yeah, Zoo Miami has done incredible work with these guys. I'm part of the Florida Bat Working Group. We just had a meeting, and they're finding this species in a lot of different areas. And Coral Gables has, I think they've had Florida bonneted bats in some of the roosts for like 80 years. So they live in urban areas, but they also live in old snags, old tree hollows throughout the Everglades. They found them in Polk County. So there's just still so much research that's needed on the species. They don't really know much about them. But there's a lot of good work being done. Zoo Miami's doing it. It's really cool to know that you guys do take them in and help them out. So, a lot of people, whenever they think of endangered species, they think, that's out in Asia and Africa, wherever. But that is one of the most endangered mammals, and they're found right here in Florida. So, I mean, we have very endangered species right in our own backyard. So pretty cool that you guys do work with them and do what you can. So we'll talk about briefly Florida bats' importance. Well, bats are the #1 predator of night flying insects, and a lot of those are mosquitoes. And we know that they can carry Zika West now, but bats also eat a lot of agricultural pests. And there was a study done about 10 years ago by the U.S. Geological Survey that showed bats save farmers between $3.7 and $53 billion a year by reducing the need for pesticides and for eating those pests. A lot of them are stink bugs. Corn earworm moth is a big one, and the spotted cucumber beetle. So it's not that they're eating the larva that does the damage, it's that they're eating the adults that are laying the eggs and everything. So, I mean, bats save farmers a ton of money by eating agricultural pests. So more importance with bats, they have done study after study, not only in Central South America, but also areas of Southeast Asia. And what they're finding is that whenever they clear cut these areas and the forests come back, a lot of those forests are bat dispersed seeds. And in certain areas, 90% of the regrowth is because of these fruit bats that are flying over these areas and dropping the seeds, whether they pass through them, and they need to pass through a bat and be able to germinate and break down the outer coating of the seed, or the bats spit them out. Because that's what fruit bats do, is they'll just get the juice out of whatever they're eating, that fruit, get the juice out of it, get the pulp, and then spit out the rest. In doing so, that they help to spread seeds. So they're extremely important for the regrowth of the rainforest. And then here's some of the fruits of economic value: mangoes, figs, dates, tequila. If you like tequila, the agave plant, so the pollinators of that flower, so they contribute billions to the global economy. So let's talk about global status, kind of where we're at with things. 25% of global bat species are threatened with extinction. It's 40% here in the United States. In the past 150 years, we've lost 9 species, including the Guam flying fox, which was eaten to extinction, and the Christmas Island pipistrelle. And a real quick story about that Christmas Island pipistrelle. I was in an international conference a few years ago overseas, and it was really, I am chairman of the Bats Taxon Advisory Group here in North America that's with the AZA. So they brought all these Taxon Advisory Group tag chairs together from all over the world. And there's a woman, Dr. Jenny Gray, and she's in charge of 3 of the largest zoos out in Australia. And she's like, why are we here? What are we doing here? And well, it's because we love animals. We chose this profession. She goes, the main reason we should be here is to try to save these animals. And she goes, have you ever heard the sound of extinction? And we didn't really know what the hell she was talking about, but she played us this recording. Christmas Island is found northwest of Australia, and it's like an island. You may have seen documentaries of those big red crabs that go on these migrations. Well, there was a bat species there, called the Christmas Island pipistrelle, and they knew in the 90s that their population was declining. They really weren't sure why, they just knew that their numbers were plummeting. So they went back a few years later, and then they went back in 2001, 5, 7, and 9, and by the time that they got there in 2007, there was just a small population. They still didn't do anything about it. Then they went back in 2009. And the recording she played us was a recording of an echolocation call. And I'm going to talk about that later on because it's pretty cool how bats echolocate. But it was the lone call of a male who was searching for a mate. And then they never ever heard from that species again. So it was pretty powerful to hear the last sound of an animal before it went extinct. And it really drove home why I do what I do for a living, why Lubee has been doing this for 32 years. It's to save these species before they go extinct. So let's talk about some other things. So audience participation, please. I'm going to talk briefly. I have a tendency to go off on tangents. I'm not just going to bore you with a bunch of bat facts, although I don't find them boring, but I'm going to talk about a couple of other things. We'll talk about endangered and extinct species. I promise I don't have a ton of slides here. I'll try to keep it relatively brief, but if anybody would want to chime in, that would be cool. So again, why do we do what we do for a living? And what started the Endangered Species Act, AZA, and what have we done to help solve them? So really, it was the near extinction of the American bison and disappearance of the passenger pigeon, which really helped to drive calls. So if you look at this picture here, every one of these little white things is bison skull. Between 1830 and 1900, There were 40 million bison. They drove them down to 300. Does anybody know how many are alive today? There are about 500,000. And a lot of those bison are on ranches. I mean, you can find bison burgers and that sort of thing. So we can thank our ranchers for helping to bring this species back. We work with hunters. A lot of people get ticked off when I say we work with hunters. I'm like, no, you don't understand. In a lot of these areas where we're working overseas, the hunters want these animals around. It's the poachers that are a problem. These hunters, it's part of their culture. It's what they do. We work with the hunters, and in some of the areas we've worked, it's led to conviction is working with hunters of poachers. So a lot of those bison are free range, but a lot of them are on ranches, and we have our ranchers to thank. Passenger pigeon. Does anybody know how many passenger pigeons were alive today, or what percentage of every bird in North America they accounted for? There were 40 billion, and they drove them down to 0. They accounted for 25% of every bird that was in North America. Absolutely incredible that they killed them all. So there are endangered species that have been saved by the Endangered Species Act and the AZA. So we all know what this is. Bald eagle. Who knows what these are? Unmute, people. Come on.
The black-footed ferret.
Excellent. Next, we have these in Florida.
Sandhill crane.
Whooping crane.
A whooping crane, sorry.
How about these guys up in California?
The condor.
Excellent. California condor. This one's a little tough. Gray whale. By the way, for folks that have been whale watching, is a fantastic experience. If those folks are out there thinking about doing a vacation, I've been very fortunate to be on a few of these. Please, if you ever have a chance, go watch whales. It's absolutely incredible. Okay, and how about these guys right here, also found out in California and some other areas?
I'll give somebody else a chance to answer.
California sea otters. So don't worry, I'm going to have a little bit more. So these are some other endangered species that are around the world that people are doing good work to try to save. Forest elephants. There's actually 3 species of elephants. Asian, African, and then your African forest elephants. Unfortunately for this elephant, its ivory has a pinkish hue, which makes it very popular for poachers, and in some area they've been decimated by 75%. So much orangutans are also hurting. Let's give the reptiles some love too. My background's reptiles, so even though I've been working with bats for 25 years, I do love the reptiles. So Philippine crocs. I just saw something really cool. I think it was on Discovery the other day. Eyes live in Madagascar. They are a type of lemur. They're really, really weird. They're nocturnal, and because they're weird, and they have this long finger that they use to tap for bugs and other things, because they look strange, some of the cultures out there think that they're demons and they kill them. They are a primate. Pangolins, I had mentioned before, Chinese pangolins. Has anybody ever heard of the vaquita found in Baja, California? It's the most endangered cetacean. They keep getting tangled in these illegal fishing nets that are run by Chinese companies, and their numbers just keep plummeting. Hopefully there's work being done out there that can save them. So, extinct species. What is this? We know what this one is. No, that's easy. How about this? What's this one?
Tasmanian tiger.
Excellent. Passenger pigeon we went over. How about this one? Now, this was found in North America. Does anybody know what these guys are? Called the Carolina parakeet. We actually have parakeets here on the East Coast. They killed them all. This is a stellar sea cow. If you compared a manatee to this, that manatee would come to about right here. These guys were found in the Bering Strait up in Alaska, and they hunted them for food and because of their blubber. They're absolutely enormous animal. How about this one? This is not affiliated. They think that they still might be around, although they're very hidden. Does anybody know what they are?
I know it's a woodpecker that lives in Louisiana, but the name is eluding me.
Right. Excellent. Yeah, ivory-billed woodpecker. They think they still might be some areas, Louisiana, Arkansas. Yeah, very, very good. So I'll finish it up very quickly. So what do these species, because I have a question for you guys here in just a second. What do these species have in common with this? No, it's not that they're extinct. And no, it's not that humans have caused their extinction. Anybody else want to take a guess what they all have in common? There is research currently being done to bring them back. So the question that I like to pose to the audience, it's called de-extinction. Should we take, because they're doing this, whether we think they should or not, should we take the money that is out there to save the species that are still here, or should we take money or do it even from a moral aspect and try to bring back species that we've made go extinct? Does anybody have any thoughts? This isn't a right or wrong. Should we save the ones that are here, or should we try to bring back animals that we caused their extinction? Well, I can tell you this. I think a lot of what I do is conservation work. So I think we should be saving the species we have here. But I would pay damn good money to see a woolly mammoth or a thylacine or a passenger pigeon. So it's kind of this, the research is being done. I mean, whether we think the money should be there or not, but I think it's just an interesting topic that, you know, they're pouring a lot of money into this. They want to try to bring woolly mammoths back. That's one of the ones they're really doing a lot of work on. Should we bring them back? Are there going to be areas for them? I don't know, but as somebody who's trying to actively save animals, I would pay money to see some of these. So I don't know. It's just something I like to bring up whenever I give these talks, just to see what folks have to say about it. So let's get back on track. Conservation threats to bats, deforestation, that's affecting a lot of the species we have here. Overhunting. This is a table full of Millennium Flying Fox, which have been prepared. These are a bunch here. We did studies out in Borneo years ago where they were taking out 3,000 to 4,000 of these bats a month, and it's absolutely unsustainable. Again, this isn't just hunting for your family or for your culture. This is absolutely just for profit, and it's unsustainable. So we've been working with a lot of areas, local governments, and communities to try to, at least, if we can't put a halt to it, to try to only have hunting when it's not maternity season. So they think that they're a cure for asthma. Come on, that's like saying rhino horn is a cure for cancer. It's not. It's hair. You know, it's just meat. So there's a lot of misunderstanding when it comes to bats. They're considered pests, and so we're doing a lot of work in these countries to try to stop it. Here in North America, has anybody ever heard of white nose syndrome before? So white nose syndrome is a disease that kills hibernating bats in Eastern North America. So again, these are bats that go into a deep hibernation. White nose is named for the white fungus that these bats have a tendency to get on their muzzles. It was first discovered in a cave outside of New York in 2006. It came from Europe. The bats over there have basically lived with this over time, and it doesn't seem to affect them as much. And when it comes down to it, essentially it wakes bats up during hibernation, and so they're supposed to be saving those energy reserves, but it depletes them. But really, it's more than that. It doesn't just wake them up and then they're hungry and thirsty, and you know they've used their fat reserves. It also really affects their respiratory and immune systems. And so this is, I think this one's from late 2019. This is the last map we have. So this is where it first came into New York, and you can see how it spread. So it's not here in Florida. There is a plan in place in case it does come here, but really it's going to be up to the fungus and if it adapts. It likes cooler climates. We don't really have bats that hibernate, although kind of up in the Florida Caverns region, the Panhandle, gray bats will hibernate there, and also tricolored bats, which tricolored bats are pretty common in the area here. But it's in 39 states, 7 Canadian provinces. It only affects, again, bats that hibernate. It affects them. So big brown bats, which we will see here in Florida, mortality rates like 25 to 40%, whereas little brown bats, it's 98 to 100. So it affects them differently. Again, not found in Florida, although it could affect tricolored bats and gray bats in the Florida Caverns region. So this was taken back in 2010. You can see where it was and then how it spread. So I mean, it's getting spread by people taking it into caves, but they also think it could be on some bat's fur, and they travel around with it. And really, unfortunately, there's not much we can do with it, although there are some folks who are doing fantastic work to try to study it. And the estimation right now is that it's killed between 7 and 8 million bats. So it's spreading, although they're really trying to do a lot to tamp down some of the restrictions that are on some of these caves and mines to stop people from going into them. So I'll wrap up my talk by talking about what we do. What have we done in the past 32 years? Well, we take really cute pictures of some of our bats. We do a little bit more than that. These are twins, frickin' frack. You don't see twins in fruit bats and flying foxes often, but every once in a while they crop up. And here are a couple twins we had born a few years ago. They're absolutely adorable. Again, we're the global leader, fruit bat husbandry, welfare, breeding, and medical management. We have about 100 and 200 bats. We're actually about 170 now. 30 years, we've had about 700 bats born, and we have 5 females that are pregnant. This is a pretty good shot of a bat nursing. So this is one of our Millennium Flying Foxes. Again, they're mammals just like we are. Whenever these particular bats are born, they're just miniature versions of the parents. They're not pink at all. They're fully furred. Their feet are about 80% the size of adulthood, so they can cling on to mom. But this is a pretty good shot. They have 2 teats. But some of the native bats we have here have more than that. Our red bats, I believe, have 4 teats to nurse because they can have up to 4 young. But fruit bat, here's some of our natives here. And we do a lot with when it comes to training, zoological and medical management workshops. Research, I mentioned whenever we were founded, there wasn't a lot of natural history on these bats, so we've facilitated a lot of the research to learn about them, biology, physiology, nutrition, and we work with a lot of the folks that were studying over at the Wuhan lab, and those folks are straight from EcoHealth Alliance. They've been doing work with fruit bat immunology for years and years and years. We work with the U.S. Army Medical Research Institute for Infectious Disease, CDC, NIH, because we want to learn more about fruit bat immune systems. They have absolutely extraordinary immune systems. They don't get sick from a lot of things that other animals might. So I don't have a slide for this, but I am going to touch on this real quick because we got a lot of questions, especially a year ago, whenever the pandemic was occurring. Bats are not spreading SARS-CoV-2, which is the virus that causes COVID-19. We have a species of bat that's here in Florida, and it's actually the most common bat throughout all of North America. They actually go into Central and South America as well. They're called big brown bats. There was just a study out of the National Wildlife Health Center out of Madison, Wisconsin, and they literally gave these bats the SARS-CoV-2 virus, and they were resistant to it. They didn't get it. They didn't get sick from it. They didn't pass it. So bats are not spreading SARS-CoV-2. Where did the virus come from? We don't know. They found a virus back in 2013 in one species of bat. Again, there was 1,421 species in one species of bat over in Asia. I believe they did find this in China, and that bat is called the intermediate horseshoe bat. The virus they found is called RATG13, and it's 96.3% similar to the SARS-CoV-2 virus. We have 98.6%, 98% the same genetics as chimpanzees. So again, a lot more genetic material in humans and primates than in viruses, but still 96.3 is a world of difference away from that virus. So we don't know where the virus came from. Did it come from bats? Did it jump from a bat to a pangolin 70, 100, 200 years ago, and it changed that animal? There's still a lot of research we don't know. One of the things I like to point out to the audience when I do this talk is these bats that we have here are not flying around with this virus. So there's still a lot to be known. They have done studies where they have given other ones that's pretty common in zoos and captivity called an Egyptian fruit bat. They gave it to 9 species. They did this out in Germany, and one of the 9 species of bats did get the virus, and I believe they did transmit it. They did that same study with ferrets, and 9 out of 9 ferrets got it. So what bats or what animals in general can get it? It seems that carnivores can get it pretty easily, whereas at least with the research we have now, that bats don't. So a lot of work to be done. I can't tell you in that Wuhan market, and again, this is a wildlife market. A lot of markets were getting blamed over there. A lot of their markets are just farmers markets here. It's the wildlife markets where you have exotic animals mixing with domestic animals, and they're being slaughtered on the spot. It's just it's not very hygienic. It's kind of barbaric. The bats were not at that market. Those bats, those intermediate horseshoe bats, are tiny. And at the time, the people in that area don't eat them. And at the time, those bats were hibernating. So again, I don't have any answers, but I can tell you that bats are not flying around with SARS-CoV-2. Where it came from, we don't know, but we get a lot of questions about it. And if anybody has any questions afterwards or any questions at all, feel free to ask. But I thought I'd at least talk about that briefly. So one of the other things that we do is a lot of field work here in Florida. And we set up these things right here. So there's a microphone inside of this big piece of PVC connected to this box. And what we do is we go out and we try to listen for bats to identify species in the area. And what's pretty cool is that each individual bat species we have here is a pretty unique echolocation call, except for red bats and Seminole bats. Those are identical. This is a Mexican free-tailed bat. I know that it's going to have kind of a tail at the end of it, and it's going to be in around a 17 to 27 kilohertz range. So whenever I do these calls, if I see this, I pretty much know automatically that this is going to be a Mexican free-tailed bat. I can't really ID anything like this because this is basically a feeding buzz, and then boom, right there, an insect got caught. Now, what is pretty cool is that it's only the free-tailed bats we see is they have these calls, and it's just these squiggly lines, and what they're saying to each other, we don't know. What's pretty cool is that whenever we get these calls back from here to here is a 1.7 second block, So in a very short amount of time, this bat is searching probably for maybe navigating around or searching for prey. It's calling in two different octaves. And in this one, it's talking to its friends. And then right here, this bat is trying to catch something. So we always thought, a lot of people ask, how intelligent are they? And my answer is that we have no idea. You have a bat, you have an animal that's flying around at night, it's navigating at the same time, it's hunting at the same time, while it's also talking to its friends, and in just extremely fast time, and trying to interpret all this information is absolutely incredible. I mean, we have no idea what goes on in their little brains because these bats are so small. But it's just incredible to me that you have a flying mammal that's doing all this at one time, and hunting, navigating, talking to its friends, finding a mate. It's just pretty incredible. Here's another species, tricolored bats, pretty common. We see them here all over the place. And I know if I see theirs, it's going to be in like the 40, 50 kilohertz range. Looks like an L, pretty easy to identify. We put up bat houses. We put up 86 bat houses. We have about an 86% success rate. Our average time is about 5 months. You get to see some of our free-tailed bats in one of the houses. Here are a few of our designs. This is at a local brewery here. It's about 2 feet by 4 feet, and that has about 3,000 to 4,000 bats in it right now. A couple other designs that we have. And so a lot of people ask, I want to put up a bat house. What can I put up for a successful bat house? Or what can I do to make a successful bat house? So this is a 2 by 2 house that we did. Put them up at 20 feet from trees, branches, from a tree line. So this right here, I think, is about 25, 30 feet. Put it out in the open, which is best. Do not put it on a tree. It's too much shade, too many obstructions. And we have a lot of rat snakes here in Florida that can climb up, along with other predators, cats and raccoons, and will eat them. So out in a post by itself is best. Stained a medium brown color. Now you guys are in South Florida, so I do like a light brown because it gets a little hotter down there. Facing space within 1 mile of water, and larger houses do better. So they don't have to be this big 2 by 2 house, but at least one that maybe has 3 chambers in it. Our 3 chambers about 30 inches by 20 inches. So the larger houses do better than the small ones. So if you're thinking about putting one up, our website, lubee.org, has a lot of information. One of the last things I'll talk about is our conservation programs. Again, 19 countries. We just got a grant. We're going to be working on 2 more. This is a project we did out in the Solomon Islands. There are 5 species of bats there called monkey-faced bats. They're all listed as critically endangered. So we started a fundraising and awareness campaign a few years ago, and working with local communities. And that led to the New Georgia monkey-faced bat being found for the first time in 3 years, Guadalcanal monkey-faced bat for the first time in 25 years. And we actually worked with our community partners in the Solomon Islands, our partners out in Australia, and then I directly was able to get a hold of the government, which was incredible. A lot of these agricultural and forestry officials, and that led to some of the first formerly protected areas in the country. And these forests have cultural, spiritual, and economic significance to a lot of these folks who there's not even electricity in some of these areas. So it's pretty cool that we did this project that started with bats, and it led to some of the formerly protected first formerly protected areas in the country. Here is an atoll called the Endangered Atoll. There are people living there, but it's getting affected by sea level rise. So we funded a project a few years ago, and we should be getting the genetic information back soon. So they knew that there were some bats out there. They just didn't know how many. There had never been any pictures of this species. So we sent a team out there, and we managed to get some of the first photos of this bat. We had also spoken with the people that are out there, and we're working on insect species, also seeing if this is a separate bat species or a subspecies. But we're also working with the communities that are out there to see what we can do to help with aquaculture, and because they don't want to leave, but a lot of their areas are getting inundated with water. So we're working with some of our partners out there, and then with Solomon Islands and Australia as well, to not only help with the wildlife, but the people. Last project I'll talk about is Madagascar. Madagascar's lost about 90% of their forests. Absolutely ridiculous. So we got a Disney grant a while ago. We were focused on a particular area by the capital called Antananarivo. So there are 3 huge bat roosts around there, and they're hunting these bats pretty relentlessly. But what we did is we work with communities to create these fire breaks around these roosts. We got together with some of the communities that were there, and we started a community seed fund. So seeds were given to women, and so we helped to empower some of the women's groups that were there. So they were given seeds, and what they had to do was plant these seeds, give back what they were given, and whatever else that they made out of that, they could sell in the markets. And they had to use sustainable agricultural techniques to do it. and it was widely successful. We've been doing this, God, for 8 years now. So what happens is when we started a seed fund, it helped to empower the women's groups. They're bringing money into the household. The household was going out to members of the community who were mostly men. It's how their culture is, and they were protecting these bat roosts. They were using sustainable agricultural techniques. They were protecting the bat roosts. They were making money, and because of that money, we were able to build schools in these areas that didn't have a lot of schools, or they had to travel far for their schools, I should say. So we were able to build schools there. So because of this project, we were able to save the bats that were there. So they were still hunting them, but they saw a 40% increase in the bat populations, which was incredible. They did not hunt them during maternity season. So they're still hunting them, just not as much as they were actually. But the numbers of the bat populations went up. They created fire breaks, empowered women's groups, community seed funds, sustainable agricultural techniques, jobs money. We were able to build schools, and that really came from getting these grants and working with our partners, our NGOs over there, to work with the communities. Again, you're not going to have any conservation unless you work with the communities, and this is one of our most successful projects. So a couple other things we did was we've been working in Rodrigues. These bats are kind of relatively common in some zoos here in the States. They look like a cross between an Ewok and a teddy bear. We've been funding a project there for years and years and years. This went from one of the most endangered mammals in the world down to 70 to about 20,000 now. Conservation success story. We've got another project to work out in the Solomon Islands, although Bougainville Island is politically part of Papua New Guinea. We're working with people there to create jobs, sustainable livelihoods. And then this is the one we just got this grant to work in New Fiji and Caledonia. We're having people in those areas lead these projects to try to find out about some of these threatened bat species. Last thing, Lubee has a lot of education. So pre-COVID, we were reaching about 30,000 people a year. We do a lot of tours and outreach programs for all ages. We've been doing private tours now. Hopefully, once people get vaccinated, we can get back to normal. We really don't care who they are, schools, scouts, religious groups, private. Everybody's welcome to Lubee. We have partnerships with Big Brothers Big Sisters, Girls Place, Gigi's Playhouse, veterans groups, and annually at our big bat festival in October, we usually have about 5,000 people. We have a ton of food vendors, a beer garden, a lot of different environmental vendors, live music. It's a big party, and I hope we can have it again this October. So the last thing is, how do people help bats? Well, one is to avoid disturbing bat roosts. This is for more folks that were going to caves and spelunking. Just make sure you follow all applicable rules. If you are under any cave closures and gated caves, mines, plant a bat-friendly garden. Now, these are all things that will bloom in the evening. It's going to bring in insects that'll help to bring bats into your area. You could put up a bat house. Just learning about your local species, just doing Google searches or learning about Lubee. Volunteer, and there's a lot of good organizations and facilities that do great work, so just volunteer out there. And if you have any questions, you can always let us know at info@lubee.org. And if you have any questions, that's my presentation. You can always go to lubee.org to learn more about what we do, lubee.org. And thank you guys very much for having me and giving me a chance to talk about our organization. Anybody have any questions?
Yes, I have a can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yes.
How do you build a bat house? Because or where do I find it? I looked at it on Amazon. It's just where do I put that on the house?
So if you Google bat house plans, you can find a ton of things. If you go to our website, lubee.org, and up at the right-hand side, or up on the top on the right-hand side, you'll see something about bat houses, information about where to put a bat house plans, and you can find a ton of things online as well.
Thanks.
Sure.
I'll put the link to the organization there in the messages. There you go. Okay. Well, thank you so much for your presentation. That was very informative.
Okay.
I learned a lot about bats. Do you have any tips for rehabbing bats that you wish some rehabbers knew? Anything about housing or feeding?
No, we're not. We don't do rehab work. The natives that we've brought in have just needed forever homes, so we were happy to take them. We do have a diet. I think it's on our website. We have diet for our natives who we've worked with a lot of people, a lot of different rehabbers. And also there's a woman named Dr. Ellen Darrenfield. She's one of the top zoo nutritionists in the world. Thankfully, she's a good friend of ours. She's on our scientific advisory board. and she's helped make our diet. So we have a diet with our, I believe we have the native diet on our website. And so if anybody wants to check that out, just see what we do with our bats. We haven't had a lot of issues. We have big brown bats here, and they do have a tendency to have some dental issues. We don't really see it too much with our evening bats or southeastern myotis, but when it comes to rehab, that's not really a lot that we do, although we have some diet information on the website.
Okay. Well, thank you so much.
Okay.
Okay. Well, thank you everybody for joining us. And this will be on our YouTube channel if you want to watch it or share it with anybody.